It's been a scorching summer across much of the world, and major rivers are feeling the heat. From the Danube to the Yangtze, water levels have been dropping dramatically in recent weeks, even approaching new records. Well, that's a problem for businesses, and one they'll almost certainly have to grapple with more in the future. Hello and welcome to our business special. I'm Stephen Beardsley, and we're filming from Deutsche Welle Studios in Berlin. We've been reporting on drought for weeks now and wanted to take a closer look at one river in particular. Now, first, I'd like to introduce my guest, Hartmut Beyer. He works at Hamburg Port Consulting in Germany, where he focuses in part on inland waterway projects. He'll give us a look at how companies are being affected, what their alternatives to inland shipping are, and what it means for firms in the long run as climate change threatens more drought more often. Hartmut, welcome to the show. I want to begin by asking you about the Rhine. That's one of Germany's major waterways, and it's been nearing record lows in recent weeks. If you had to sum it up for viewers who perhaps haven't been keeping up with the situation, how serious has it been for businesses?
Yeah, hi, Stephen. Well, I think the situation is a challenge at the moment. I mean, we have seen this development, the declining of the water level throughout the previous weeks. And we hear about the challenges, about the problems the inland waterway transport is facing at the moment. So it is a kind of a challenge. I believe in the logistics industry to find a solution on that, definitely. But however, I mean, just let you remind that we had a similar situation in 2018 with even, less water levels.
All right. And this year, it's not just the Rhine. We want to take a look at some of the other major rivers that have been affected by drought in recent weeks. In China, the driest summer in 6 decades is hitting tributaries to the Yangtze River, bringing the river to half its normal width. Ship traffic is slowing as a result. Authorities have also closed the canal connecting the country's northeast to Wuhan, which is on the river. Meanwhile, the source of the Thames dried up last week as the UK faces its driest summer in 80 years. The Thames is an important source of water. Parts of the country have now put watering bans in place to limit the strain on the river. And of course, the Rhine. It's a crucial waterway, not just for Germany, but for continental Europe, connecting industrial firms upstream with the North Sea. The Rhine has been at critical levels for more than a month now. So what do these low water levels mean for ships and for the captains who drive them? We'll take a look at this personal account from a Dutch captain on the Rhine.
Normally, you have more than 2 meters under the ship. But now you only have 40 centimeters in some places. And then the challenge is for us to get past those points without hitting the bottom, without damaging the ship. Say we have 100% cargo normally, we're now taking 30 to 40%.
All right, Hartmut, looking at the picture of that captain, he looks like he's pretty at ease there, sort of leaned back, his ship is moving forward. At the same time, it has to be nerve-wracking when you listen to what he was talking about in these shallow depths in a river. How does a large ship even fit through such low water levels?
Well, the answer to this question is that, of course, the vessels cannot transport the cargo load that transported before. So what they do is to distribute the cargo, which would have been transported by one vessel, to 3 or 4 vessels to make sure that the depth of the draft of the vessel is not as much as before, so that they can pass the shallow parts in the river.
I've read somewhere that actually makes the ship lift up a little bit on the water, and then you have bridges in some cases that it might scrape. I guess, have you heard of any of those concerns as well? Is that typical?
No, bridges. I mean, the matter of bridges is, of course, when you have high water. I mean, even that takes place once in a while on the River Rhine. And then, of course, you have a challenge with the overall height of the vessel. But in these days, if you have the low water, you won't have a challenge with the bridges.
What is the current status of the Rhine? Can we say, is it still falling, or are water levels moving back up?
So the level is staying at the moment at a very low level. They expect a slight increase of the water level because of some rainfalls taking place in the region. But however, I think next week I had to look to the forecast again. We will have very good sunshine in the region, and unfortunately not enough rain.
All right, so the potential, well, not enough rain, I think you just said. So it's going to be a slow improvement. I think we just heard that captain saying that his ship was running at a much lower capacity. I believe he said 40%. Is that typically what we're seeing on the Rhine right now, around 40% capacity for these ships?
Yeah, it is about that that percentage. It even can go down to 30%, and because there are lots of industries, or let's say concernees on the River Rhine, which are heavily depending on the transportation by inland waterway vessel. That's the way how they get supplied with raw material like coal and ore and oil, building materials whatsoever, and they have. They have located on the River Rhine to be supplied by the inland water vessels. So they are depending on that. And for some of them, they even have no chance to go for another transport mode, for example.
Do we know what it's meant for their businesses? I would imagine they have to then have multiple ships in order to get the same load out, and that would be expensive in theory.
Indeed. I mean, we have to, it's twofold. I mean, the one hand side are the vessel operators. They ask for a low water surcharge to compensate the fact that they can transport only 20-30% of the original cargo volume. That's the one part of the story. And of course, the one who orders, who calls the shipper, let's put it this way, the shipper who orders the vessel, of course, he has to pay then at the end of the day 3 or 4 times what he would have to pay it before.
Is it hard getting those ships now if everyone needs more ships all of a sudden?
Oh, indeed, that's a right point. I mean, the number of vessels are limited, and that's the challenge that everybody tries to get the vessels, but the capacity is limited. Yeah, and that brings up some additional pressure.
Even if we do see the river begin to rise again, how long will it be before shipping really returns to normal? I guess it depends on how much rain comes, or what have we seen in the past?
Exactly. Depends on the rain, and not quite sure about. But I would say about 2 to 3 weeks. But again, it depends on the rain until you have a moderate water level again, where you can do commercial viable business with inland waterway transportation.
Mm. So what are the alternatives to transporting via ship? Let's take a look at a comparison right now. If we can pull that up, larger inland cargo ships, it can carry around 5,000 metric tons of coal as a single load on average. Now compare that to the average rail cargo. It's reduced to 3,000 in this case. A truck transport, you can move even less, on average about 23 tons. So many, many more trucks would be necessary to move the same load as a fully loaded inland cargo ship. In this case, we use the example of coal, of course. Now that's even assuming there's extra capacity on rail and on the roads. We recently put a reporter on a coal barge in the Rhine. Listen to what he says.
We have to understand the Rhine is the most important German waterway for shipping, and they are still carrying coal, but they are carrying 1/3 of the possible cargo that the ship could actually carry. This coal, this amounts to about 16 cargo trucks. We have oil pipelines that go alongside the Rhine, and there's also trains carrying cargo, but both of them are at full capacity at the moment. And that means it will be very difficult to keep up the supplies further south. Now, we've had a severe economic downshift after a drought in 2018. And with coming droughts in, with the climate crisis to go, we are looking at a downturn of the economy.
All right, our reporter Matas Grishman there talking about the overarching economic consequences of this, but also about the alternatives. What Matas is saying there, is that what businesses are finding as well, that there aren't a lot of great alternatives when we look at rail and road at the moment?
Well, it seems to be, there seem to be alternatives, but I think it has been mentioned to a certain extent by him. I mean, shifting over to railway transport is a good idea, of course, because this kind of transportation fits to the kind of cargo raw materials, which is normally transported by inland waterway vessels. But indeed, again, here we have a limitation of capacity when it comes to the wagons, first. And secondly, we also have a limitation of the network due to the reconstruction works which are taking place at the moment on the German railway network. So that is one point when it comes to a railway. And if you look for the other alternative, the truck transportation, again, a very good mode as such. But indeed, here again, we have some capacity limitations. There are figures stating that about 100,000 truck drivers in Europe were Ukraine, or let's say they went back to the Ukraine to fight against the Russians, and so they have left their job, and so at the end of the day, they are missing. So again, there's a limitation in capacity, limitation in workforce to steer the trucks.
So there's not a lot of great alternatives. You mentioned that trucker shortage because of various reasons, the economic recovery from the pandemic being one that we often hear about, in addition to what you mentioned there, Ukraine truck drivers moving away from some of their jobs. Can you say anything, Hartmut, about the actual cost of inland shipping versus these other modes?
I can't give you figures about the actual costs. I mean, and it's sometimes very difficult to compare the transportation costs because each transport mode has a specific capability and quality. I mean, if you take a truck, it can go directly from the production line to the consignee. If you go for railway transport or inland waterway transport, you always have an on-carriage or pre-carriage, and then an on-carriage lag. So it's very difficult to compare. In particular, it also depends on how much cargo is transported, how long is the train, and. So I don't want to go into too much details. Well, in normal cases, if you say you pay for the transport by inland waterway vessel maybe €1 just as an indicator, railway transport maybe €2, and truck transport maybe €4. This is just a very brief relation which shows in normal times, the average, very average transport costs of the different transport modes.
Okay, so in terms of looking at the load that can be moved, the distance being covered, it would tend to be that inland shipment is more cost efficient than these other modes. We can at least say that.
Indeed, in particular for the material which is suitable for this transport mode, which is raw material, which is required in heavy loads, building material, oil, as I said, chemicals, all the stuff. And for that kind of goods, you use the inland waterway system because transport costs are very low.
You mentioned some of the goods being moved along waterways. We saw Matas there on a coal barge. That is one of the products that's often moved along the Rhine. And I understand that slower and I guess smaller shipments of coal obviously ends up having an effect as well. Can you give us an idea of what it means for the end user when they're looking at energy shipments? I guess this sort of adds to an overall energy cost problem that we're seeing in Germany right now, or at least it doesn't help.
No, it really doesn't help, and we have to see what can be done in that respect. Yeah.
All right. Well, we talked about some of the alternatives in the short term. Let's talk about the long-term outlook when it comes to rivers facing drought. Now, as we've alluded to already, things likely aren't going to get better soon. Climate change is promising more extreme weather, including heavy droughts. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has said that with a 2-degree increase in global temperatures compared to pre-industrial averages, drought is a major concern, in particular for Central and Southern Europe, parts of Africa, and Southeast Asia. Hartmut, given these concerns, when we look at climate models, when we look at the possibility that there are more droughts that are going to be more frequent in the years ahead, do we see signs that businesses are taking this into consideration when they think about how they're moving goods or what they're doing with inland transportation?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in 2018, that was already a kind of, event or a low water situation where the industry started thinking about it. And I think at that time, most of the people thought it might not happen again in another 10 or 20 years. But what we see now, wake up call, 2022, we have the same situation again. So the industry will adapt to this situation. And if you talk about the industry, we have to make a distinction. I mean, on the one hand side, we have the vessel operators, the shipping lines. They will go for shallow water vessels, which are able to go even on at low water levels and are still commercial viable, because this is how it works. Otherwise, you cannot manage a shipping line. This is one thing. When it comes to the consignees or production companies on the River Rhine, they might even have to adopt the logistic concept or strategy. I mean, the previous years we had this just-in-time production, reducing any need for keeping, any cargo available. But these days they have to change the strategy and have to look to build up some backup to store the cargo maybe on their side to make sure that they can handle this kind of interruption of transportation, which hasn't taken place at the moment, but so that they can take care of that. So this is the second group, and the third one is maybe the National Inland Waterway Authority of Germany. Of course, they see a need, and it is on the plan. It is planned already to look for dredging some stretches of the River Rhine to make sure that even at low water, the operation can continue. So that's the plan at the moment. They're working on this, to my understanding.
You mentioned 2018 as the last major drought that hit the Rhine several years, just 4 years ago. I want to circle back to that. How bad was that in comparison to what we've seen now? Is it similar, or was it even worse than what we've seen in 2022?
We'll see this in maybe 3 or 4 months, then we can make a final calculation on that. What I understand, it was a bit worse than at the moment. Yeah, but let's see how it will continue. Let's pray for some rain and that this situation will improve pretty soon.
And my understanding is they actually closed some sections of the Rhine in 2018. Do you remember that as well?
Yes, they did, but that was just for a number of days. And of course, the companies, they had to handle with this particular situation. And then, of course, they continued to produce and to work as they did before.
Can anything be done about the nature of the rivers themselves? You mentioned, how businesses can prepare. You mentioned how the shipbuilding industry can prepare in terms of making ships that run at lower water levels. What about more work on the infrastructure itself in terms of, deepening a channel?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this dredging is indeed something which is necessary, and to my understanding, it is on the map. It is planned. However, this is something which will take time and of course needs a lot of money from the state budget. You know about the competition to get enough resources to work on the infrastructure. So this is indeed something which needs to be done. Not the complete riverbed of the Rhine, of course, but there are some spots where we have very low water, and that can be improved by some dredging. Again, but let me just mention this, it is not easy in Germany. We have a lot of, public interests from the people living on the River Rhine. We have the interest from the environment, and all needs to be, of course, considered to get it implemented later on.
All right, so changing the river might be much harder than changing the businesses and their plans themselves. Let's end on that note, and that is all for our business special today, looking at falling water levels in major rivers around the world and what that means for business. Many thanks to my guest, Hartmut Beyer, If you've enjoyed this video, remember to hit like and subscribe, and you can check out some of our other stuff on the DW News YouTube channel. From me and the team, thanks for watching. We hope to see you again soon.